This video is made possible by my patrons on Patreon. Hello everyone, my name is Ziamaro and welcome to Battlerite Sage. Just quickly before I start, if you're watching this at the time it goes out, remember that it's Monday, so if you want, after you finish the video, head over to twitch.tv/battleritesage. So, Season 2 is now well underway, and most of us have done our placements by now. I actually held off doing this video until the Season 2 patch dropped, because lately the changes in each patch have been pretty drastic. The point of these videos is not to tell you what's OP. I make these videos with expanding your champion pool in mind, and no matter how many champions you can already play, it's always worth learning more. So, quick disclaimer, remember that the balance in this game is pretty solid on the whole. People have reached GC as every single champion. If you want to play a certain champion, just go ahead. Plus, if something is really strong or weak right now, you can guarantee it's going to be balanced eventually. So if you really like a champion but it's currently weak, just play it. And likewise, you don't have to play a champion you don't enjoy just because it's strong right now. But with that out of the way, let's start with melee. Now, I know I said this isn't just about picking what's strong right now, but I wouldn't be doing you any favours if I didn't mention Rook. Rook has always been a pretty good pub stomping champion, but right now he's an absolute monster. He's already had to be toned down once, and I would brace yourself for more changes just in case. But in the meantime, he's a very strong pick. Even if he does get nerfed, he's still a good champion to have under your belt. One of the best things about Rook is his simplicity. His kit isn't incredibly complicated, so if you're a ranged or a support main, you can learn to play him pretty quickly. Another great thing about Rook is his burst potential, and if you've been playing this game for a while, you'll know exactly why that's a good thing. Punish windows can be pretty short in Battlerite, so being able to push out as much damage as possible in that short window is imperative, and there aren't many melee champions who can compete with Rook's burst. The main downside to Rook is how punishable he is once his counter and right click are down though, and for that reason it's super important to get maximum value out of those two abilities. Once you have no counter or iframe, you're basically just a fat energy battery. So while he may be a pub stomper at low ranks, he becomes a champion who relies heavily on strong mind games at high ranks. So hold on to that counter until you know it's gonna get hit. Next champion we'll be looking at is Jamila. Yeah, that's right, I said Jamila. Okay. She's still got a trash tier ultimate, but with some of the other recent changes, she's actually pretty good if you know how to play her. The addition of the space recast right gives her some great mobility options and extra damage potential, and the extra immaterial duration gives her that tiny bit of extra survivability that she needed. Don't get me wrong, she's still a hard champion to play, but she's definitely worth learning now. Jamila works particularly well with comps that can burst her in-cap targets, or help her survive when she has no cooldowns. Personally, I think Lucy, Xander and Paloma are all pretty good fits for Jamila. Likewise, bursty range champions like Jade and Ashka complement her very well. If you want an easy time climbing, Jamila probably isn't the champion for you, but don't underestimate her, she has a lot of potential now. As a quick honourable mention, I would have included Thorn here, but I already talked about him last time. He's still good, maybe even better than he was in Season 1, so he's another champion who's worth learning if you haven't already. Moving on to ranged, one champion who seems to be getting buffs after buffs is Alicia. And I think she's finally in a state where you can reliably pull your weight in any situation. Alicia's had great burst and sustained damage ever since launch. And if left to do her own thing, she's always been a very strong champion. But the cooldown reduction on her E and Q, combined with a number of other changes to her survivability, finally put her in a position where she can hold her own even when she's being focused. Alicia has a lot of tools in her kit to deal with almost any situation. A shield for herself or allies, a projectile block that can stop even piercing abilities like snipe, an ice block that heals and cleanses herself or allies, and so much crowd control. A good Alicia has so much control over the flow of a fight thanks to her abundance of snares and a couple of different ways to freeze targets. And especially with the Icebreaker Battlerite, she can put out a lot of burst as well as massive 17 damage left clicks on chilled targets. When faced with aggressive melee champions, she can be tough to play, but she actually has enough tools in her kit now on short enough cooldowns that a good Alicia can effectively deal with it. The next range champion worth learning in this patch is Ivor. I know, this is another one that might seem like an oddball suggestion, but Ivor's strength has really creeped up on us all. She's like a little ranged assassin. When you give her enough room to do so, she has the ability to dive in, do some pretty respectable bursts, and get back out again. In some respects, the way she deals damage is kinda comparable to Esmo. She often needs to use one of her outs to engage, and she needs to get relatively close for a ranged champion. And just like Esmo, you can't ignore her while she's there. But unlike Esmo, she has a lot of team-oriented utility. First off, she has her Q shield. Not only does it protect your allies from damage, but it also cleanses debuffs. That means if your teammate eats something scary like a Rook incap, not only can you mitigate the burst, but you can actually break the incap too. Secondly, she's the only ranged champion with an incap. This allows her to either create breathing room for her team or set up some great bursts. And let's not forget that she's one of only 2 champions in the game who can purge buffs from enemies. So against any champion who relies heavily on shields, she's a very strong pick. And her E actually cleanses as well now, so she actually has 2 ways to remove debuffs from allies. Genuinely, Ivor has gone from a fairly low pick rate champion to an absolute beast without too many people even noticing. Finally, let's take a look at some of the support champions, starting with my personal favourite, Paloma. Paloma was struggling a little bit in the early weeks of Season 1. Not because she was weak, but because she was just not favourable in the meta at the time. After Freya and Shifu received nerfs, and some of the tankier melee champions like Thorn, Bakko and Rook became more common, Paloma was already becoming a more viable pick. It's worth noting that Paloma doesn't necessarily struggle against Freya or Shifu, she just works better with tanky melee champions. The meta shift alone made her at least viable, but she actually received some buffs quite recently too. I was always a fan of her Shimmering Bond Battlerite, but now it's really good. With Shimmering Bond, you heal 8 to your primary target and 7 to all linked targets. So if everyone in the team needs healing, every mouse 1 heals 22 HP. That makes her superb at dealing with spread damage. She's also had a much needed buff to her self-healing thanks both to the Shimmering Bond change and the fact that her EXQ heals her for 20 HP now. Her burst healing and damage output is also somewhat improved with the reduced pixie cooldown. And don't forget other side. With Xander being pushed out of the meta, Paloma is now the go-to support if you want a get out of jail free card. Her main downside is her lack of reliable self-healing. So if you end up in a 1v1 against a ranged champion, unless they're silly enough to get close enough for you to EXQ them, your only way to self-heal is either other side or wolf with the affection right. And now for our final champion, and I'm afraid this is one we covered last time, Blossom. Now, I didn't really want to repeat champions that I included last time, but last time I suggested Blossom as an easy to pick up support for DPS mains. That's still the case, but she's actually a very strong pick in general now. The increased tree health gives her a lot more flexibility in her loadout. With certain Battlerites, she has access to a very strong AoE haste when the tree expires or is destroyed. She can get an AoE 1.4 second stun, and she has an ultimate right that can do 84 damage or more if it pierces multiple enemies. She's always been pretty decent in a 1v1 situation, but she actually has so much offensive power now. If you play it right, you can heal and prevent a lot of damage with your tree while focusing on dealing damage. Another great use for the tree is blocking Rook charges, who, as we all know, is very common right now. Blossom is both very strong and favoured in the soloQ meta at the moment, so more than ever she's a great support to learn. One thing that I'd like to knock on the head, there's a common misconception that she's a boring heal bot due to her very short heal cooldowns, but that couldn't be further from the truth. She has a lot of offensive impact. E into charge left click into EX space does 60 damage. That's a lot of burst for a support. Oh yeah, and that 84 damage ultimate that I mentioned? Try hitting Rook with that after his counter and iframer down and just see what happens. So there will obviously be other champions I've missed, but I just wanted to stick to 2 champions per category. Because as I said at the start of the video, if you're good enough, you can climb to GC with any champion. I just wanted to draw attention to some champions who are currently favoured in the meta, or in the case of Ivor and Jamila, have recently become a genuine threat. If there's a particular champion you would recommend learning, let people know why you think so down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please feel free to subscribe for more Battlerite guides, news and discussion. If you'd like to help support the channel and get some unique rewards, then head over to patreon.com/battleritesage. And don't forget to check out twitch.tv/battleritesage. Until next time, thank you for watching and I'll see you soon.